Hi everyone, this is Dr. Alana. Today's conversation for students who are designing research and starting to write it is all about writing. And so our topic is turning writing weakness into strength. We'll go over a series of challenges that we found when people sent in writing as data, and then we'll go through some things that are typical but weren't actually in our data set this time. Hopefully that'll be an interesting conversation to you, as it'll help you understand when you send in data to a reviewer and they send back red marks, what's going on in their head and what are they looking for. So there's a whole list of things. But before we do that, we're going to start with a discussion. So I'm going to ask the people in the room to do just a little typing and see what has gone well for you this summer when you've been working on your research design and your academic writing, beginning to write this up. What's gone well? What are you proud of? Let's all celebrate the fact that a lot of positive movement has gone on, so we can celebrate with each other. And for those of you who just joined us, there is also a poll that gives some answers to this question, and you can choose as many answers as you want. Annaline, if you only are allowed one, it was brought up yesterday that it might be the browser you're in. Because others have been able to choose more than one. So just in the chat, what's happened that you're glad for? We'll give it a minute as we start the discussion. Learning from the 5 exemplar dissertations has been powerful. Penelope, that's good to hear. I think that having model exemplar or model dissertations allows us to critically analyze what this job is. So it's powerful for me too. Every time I do it, I learn something more, and that allows the system to work better. So thank you for pointing out that it works at your level as well. Anybody else? And today we're going to see an example of someone who has taken the route of absorbing from an exemplar and then writing over it, and we'll see the strengths and the weaknesses that come from that approach. The number one enemy regarding my writing used to be the technical terms used in my field. They simply throw people off. It's true. Not anymore. Now that I have put quite some effort into wording my ideas as clearly as I can. Isn't that a great, when you have the same challenge over and over and over, and finally they don't say that anymore? I changed my study concept as my mentor talked sense into me for keeping it simple. Yes, I always say that your goal right now is to get out of here with a degree, and you can do all the fabulous things that you want to do later. If you get too complicated, you only keep yourself in school longer. So, it's good to hear that was useful. Anybody else in the room? And if I'm looking at the polls, just to tell you, about half of you have taken it. And the better understanding of what a proposal is and how it works. No, the first one is increased comfort with the process, followed quickly by better understanding of the proposal and how it works, better habits when it comes to working every day, and improved academic writing. So those are really good outcomes. Anybody else have any more specific outcomes? If not, some are still joining us. At the end of today, I'll try to tell you once again what the poll was. So if you're still here, please jump in and see if there are, how many there are there that you can say, yeah, you feel better about that for having hung out with this group this summer. Now let's jump into turning writing weakness into strength. Some of these, as I said, will have examples from students who sent their work in, allowing me to use it as data. Others will be just conversation about things we know are typically challenges. But in all cases, I'm talking about the fix as well as the challenge. So turning writing weakness into strength. Well, okay, so here's a couple of examples of spelling and grammar issues. When teachers choose to leave their careers in totality, it is a fatal lose for all involved. Obviously, a spelling error for the word loss, but because the word lose is a word, wasn't caught by spell check. What's the solution for that? It's the read aloud in your command bar, and I'll show you in just a second how to get that going. And then this other one is subtle. The purpose of this study is to describe and understand online learning experiences of teachers and professional learning. In one case, that when you have something joined by an and, you want the sides to go together. So is it the learning experiences of teachers in professional learning experiences? Is it the online learning experiences of teachers and professional learning in general, professional learning, specifically professional learning in this area that those teachers are in? Something's up with that sentence that makes it hard. And when you're sending your work off to a professor to review, every time they get stuck, you don't want them to get stuck in a sentence like that. You want them to just read along and have opinions about what you're saying, not to wonder what that sentence meant. So let me go quickly to the screen share, and I'll pull up a document. And here we go. So this is Microsoft Word, and as you can see, it has the navigation pane open on the left-hand side so that all the headings in this document are showing, and it's Word 365. Up at the top, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but in the upper left-hand corner, up by where the autosave is, there's a number of icons, and one of them looks like the letter A with a couple of lines around it. That is Read Out Loud, and that's your revision friend. So let me show you how to get it if you haven't seen this before. You click on this little down arrow, which brings up an option, and you can go get more commands. It brings you to popular commands, but what we do are not usually the popular commands, so we go to all commands. And then zip down to the R's, and there will be one that says Read Aloud, which you hit add and it ends up in the right-hand side. Then when you click OK, it's up there, and when you put your cursor anywhere, you touch it.
Another student comes to class and faces either the same overworkload or bad.
And so you can then hear what it is you wrote. I believe that this person, the purpose of the study is to describe and understand online learning experiences of teacher and professional learning, may have caught that if they heard it. It isn't the kind of thing that most of us catch easily when we see it. So another problem brought in the problem statement, question of when do we use citations? And so I'm going to read this to you and then talk to you about how. This person actually had a insert after research on this topic has been linked with quantitative and qualitative studies, and they thought they might insert a lot of citations there. My recommendation would be that they would, in fact, break up that long list of all the things they've read that are quantitative and qualitative studies into these others. Much of the research is connected to the premise of retention of staff in early career phase 1 to 3 years. So who researched that? More emphasis has been placed to the research that focuses on retention of early career teachers in extreme poverty schools. So that's going to be a bigger group citation. The study of teacher attrition has sought the teacher's insight over policies, standardized testing, current work condition demands, and salary. So everybody, even those included in the first two who actually came to those outcomes, would be after that sentence, and then leads into the limitation in, and I'd get rid of the word previous, because the limitation in this research is the gap between teachers in high stress, low poverty environments that leave, and those that are in low stress, high success situations that choose to leave their field. And then rather than say the perceptions of such domains have yet to be explored, I would simply end that paragraph as this study addresses that gap. Why did I take out previous? Because when you're writing, those things that you are reading are all previous research, and therefore it's redundant. All right, so what's the fix here? Maybe if you're attuned to how these documents read, you would understand as you read this that you needed you had used the word research, and every time you use the word research, you need to cite who you're talking about. And then as you're talking about different kinds of research, you need to cite who you're talking about. So you might hear it, but probably you're going to just meet in your head a rule that no strong statements of facts get through your document without citations, no strong statements of facts, and never talk about research as a word without citing afterwards whose research you're talking about. And then my final thing, and you'll hear me say it today many times, is that how do we get better at this? Good writers are great readers. So, and everybody who's ever written about writing in any context will say that as something that they say. So I recommend that all of you spend some time reading the section of the dissertation or thesis that you're writing right now, reading it, just reading other people's work. Just get it in your head, what it sounds like to write this way. Okay, paragraphs being too long, definitely if it's a page long, you should be highly suspicious. And if it is a half a page long also, let me see if I can, oh, that was the one I needed. And of course I closed it out, bear with me. Is it this one? Yes. Okay, I'm going to read this paragraph, and I want you all to count how many topics you think, how many points are being made in this paragraph, how many topics, and then we'll compare at the end what we count. So let's see what we say. I'll show you it on the screen if that's helpful. A systematic search on PubMed, MBOS, and Web of Science on isolation or loneliness on immigrant health in Bismarck, North Dakota, did not yield any studies. Excluding Bismarck and North Dakota, the search was repeated with immigrants and immigrants and social ties or connectedness or isolation or loneliness as keywords without limiting the geography, which resulted in 188 articles. Limiting these by adding African or Africa to the account for the target audience broadly resulted in 33 studies, yet none related to immigrants' experience in our cultural and geographic setting. In response to this gap, this study seeks to understand the experience of loneliness and social isolation by immigrants from Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda in Bismarck, North Dakota. Immigrants from these East African countries were an ideal research group for this geographic location because they constitute the largest population of federally resettled refugees in the central North Dakota, Lutheran School Services, etc. cited. They are from similar ethnic and linguistic groups and came through near identical processes through the local resettlement agency, giving them very similar timelines, backgrounds, and current economic and political situations in Bismarck, North Dakota. The researcher also has access to language translators for the main languages spoken by this target population. Limiting this study to ethnically similar people might help understand the degrees of loneliness and social isolation experienced and factors that influence it more deeply. Understanding the specific factors experienced by the target population will help inform and advocate for immigrants in Bismarck, North Dakota in a culturally relevant manner based on gaps identified in the literature. Okay, how many things did you count? How many topics? Oops, looks like. Oh, and several of you have come back with things you're proud of that I didn't see. So I'll come back to those as we finish this conversation. Let's see. 4. Penelope suggests 4, 2. What else? 4 as well. Honestly, lost track. I actually counted 3. I would, and this is, the point here is, when you see in your document an overly long paragraph, you need to go back into it and read it, asking yourself, how many points do I make? Because this person, at least there is the first section that's the systematic search on PubMed being explained. Okay, then there's a section on the immigrants in North Dakota coming from a number of places in Africa, and how did they end up in North Dakota? And then there's a section of the fact that they're a good population because they have similar and ethnic linguistic. And Adrian is saying fix is the meal plan. And if you go to pd.education and you do a search on academic writing, Professor Maria has, I don't think she titled it the meal plan, but she did a particularly useful webinar on academic writing, and she calls it the meal plan, which will tell you the fact that each one of these needs to be determined in its own paragraph. And I'll get, let me first talk about the conversation we're having, and then I want to just go back a second to the ones I meant. So the fix, outlining and proper planning, I'll get to outlining in a minute. It's another fix. Yuchi asks, what if you're doing a lit review section and addressing a bunch of supporting literature? Each paragraph is a topic. So you have a bunch of literature about a particular heading, but each group of literature addresses a topic. And Yuchi, if you go to the pd.education site and you look up using spreadsheets to organize your lit review, you'll see that one solution is to organize the points you want to take from each author into columns, and then sort the columns in a spreadsheet, and then you write the columns. You don't write the authors. So let me see what else we've got here. I just want to say that at the top, when I had left, that there were many things that people were very pleased with, and I didn't see them. So we have Annaline saying that totally changed your study concept. Okay, talked into making it simple. We heard that one. I'm proud that I've been able to alter my dissertation research to be conducted online due to circumstances. That's brilliant. May everybody else who's had those challenges have that same positive outcome, Yuchi. Well done. I'm proud of being able to apply for a scholarship that's geared towards your doctoral research. The winner has not been shown, Asia, fingers crossed, but I felt that when I submitted, which was the synopsis of the research methodology, was sufficient enough to not only apply, but to better understand the focus. Well done. These things are iterative, and every time we take one of those steps, we make the whole thing stronger. So we're keeping this big chart simple. That was a good comment, and I think I've caught up. Adrian, if you have it, if you could in the background, find the link to whichever one it is that has the meal plan in it. I will save it for other people because I know it's always been good for you and your writing. All right, so that's what happens with paragraphs too long. Let's keep trudging on. What about redundancy or lack of consistency? They are real small. Let me just tell you, this is the thing that at the proposal stage will get you more red marks and more question mark comments. If you don't absolutely say things in just the right way, there's slippage. And so you need to really hone in on that. Here we have two examples, really within two paragraphs right after each other. The purpose of this qualitative study is to investigate the novice school principals' experiences of mentor programs and how it impacts student achievement and teacher retention. Next paragraph. The experiences of the mentor program for a novice school administrator and the mentor's perceptions of the mentor program will be investigated to see if there is a correlation between the mentor experience and the leadership outcomes of a novice building administrator in regards to student achievement and student and teacher retention. Essentially, they say the same thing, and they're very close together. Highlight in redundancy. And these documents really, it's hard to keep redundancy out of them, especially if you're writing to a rubric or a set of standards given to you by your university. It's very hard to know what goes where exactly. But when it comes to your description of your methodology and what it investigates, spend some time out of your document working out the exact words that you really like. Get them somewhere up front in the document, like in the background. And then if you feel inclined, you can refer back to it for, as is stated in chapter 1, the purpose of the study is, and you can even, so that you're not in a place like this where in 2 paragraphs, you're forced your reader to essentially read the same thing. I think most academics have a low tolerance for research. And Pat brought up a very good point, which the second point I was going to make is this is under the heading research question, but it's not a research question. So all of this should have been in the section above, and then the research question should be usually headed up by a sentence. This study will hone its research by asking the following research questions. Something simple like that. So what's the fix? Read out loud in your command bar again. Will probably catch that you've said the same thing over and over. And the other thing is mapping it out. And then this is what happened when I mapped that same section out. There was the purpose, which was an investigation of 2 particular kinds of things: the perceptions of the new administrators about their mentoring and some kind of correlation data with their student and faculty success outcomes. Nowhere in the way this author is writing up their study have they indicated that those outcomes are going to be anything more than the self-report of the administrators, which I think is probably going to be an error that their committee will question them on, because you self-report data on success is at best a perception. So if they can find, I kind of pushed back and asked them if they could find other kinds of correlating data that they could then put in. And then that would be an investigation of two different kinds of data that would tie together. The method would then include a survey. And I always recommend that if you say you're going to have a survey, you have to write the survey and attach it at the back in an appendix. Because if I'm examining a proposal, I want to see what those questions are and whether or not they really get to the research questions that you think you're asking. Same thing with open-ended survey data. And again, when you look at methods, what you're looking for is, examiner is looking for, is to see whether those methods actually get to what you say you're going to do. So they need to be very precise. And then when you say they're questions, you need to give them the questions. So the fix in this case was back to what Annalene suggested. If you take the time to outline what you're going to do, sometimes that saves you writing because you've got it clear. Sometimes outlining makes us have clarity. Okay, let's talk about another challenge. Most of the data I was looking at were from the methodology sections. Did the novice principal's experiences with his or her mentor impact student achievement? And did the novice principal's experiences with his or her mentor impact teacher retention? What's wrong with those? Well, they're not measurable. You don't want yes or no questions. Yes, they did. No, they didn't. Not a good research question. So what's a fix? Change the lead in to something that gives you scope, so that when you do your analysis, you can come up with the nuances and have a much more interesting story to tell at the end. Gets to the same ideas, but with nuanced outcomes. And the one that my advisor taught me that I continue to use is whether and to what extent. Whether and to what extent is there evidence that the novice principal's experiences with his or her mentor impacted student achievement? Same thing, impacted teacher retention. Oh, very good. Meal plan is up and illustrated. Adrian gave us the outcome there. So definitely copying that one. And inclusive language of his, her, very much a challenge in writing, and as supported. So his, her is now supported by APA 7. It does, this particular person is at a school where they're suggesting that they can keep with APA 6 if they want to. You ask that kind of questions at the end of the day of your committee. What are they comfortable with your writing? But if they're going to be strictly APA 7, then the his, her. No? Yuchi said no. They is supported. Thank you, Yuchi. Appreciate that. They is supported. They instead of his, her. Yep, didn't read it carefully, did I? So questionable methods. This is just these are the kinds of things you talk over with your supervisor. But if you have, you may be designing and you may be saying, oh, a random sample, that's a good thing. I should have a random sample. This particular person, participants of the study include a random sampling of novice administrators from school districts that are served by a particular center. The challenges are that my question back was, did they know what made for random sampling? Did they have an idea of the work they were going to have to do to get a random sampling? And since in this day and age, data are very hard to get, especially from busy people, and administrators are busy people, do you want to hone into having to have a random sampling only to have half the people you ask say no? So I would question whether or not, if you don't have to have it, don't. If you need to have other things that make your sampling look more rigorous, then I would go for purposive and really look up what that means prior to deciding that you have to do random. Because one is a bit of work, and then it still gives you the ability to have the convenient sample that you need, more or less. This might be very hard to pull off. What's the fix? In general, when you think you are going to do any research design, take the time to figure out exactly what that means in terms of the work required. Because oftentimes you'll get to proposal hearing, and the people who have done the work before, who are your committee, will know that you're setting yourself up for a bigger challenge than you probably want to take on. Okay, so we're using they. I'm just looking at the chat. And the second year of limiting. So other people have made comments about this particular idea for sampling. The fact that it's a second year of leadership is limiting. Again, every time you have a population that size like this, and you say your sample is going to be this, this, or this, if your sample gets too small, it's very hard to get the data. And the reasoning might sound contradictory. Good. All of you making comments on this writing is very good. Let's see about this. So, passive sentences. These results will be published in the next issue of the journal. What's the fix? That's a great link if you have any problems with passive. It's an OWL, and if you don't know the OWL at Purdue Education, they are a very good writing source, and researchers will publish results in the next journal. So what do you do with passive? Generally, you have to look at who is the doer and move that to the front of the sentence, and then you can get a more active verb. But passive sentences, that and anthropomorphism, are the two challenges that writing centers will say they find the most in first draft doctoral work. Okay, so we'll look about weak words. The participants of this study include a random sampling of novice administrators from school districts that are in Region 4 Education Service Center. This person absolutely knew what they were saying. They knew that they were talking about a service center that served a number of schools. But the way that sentence reads, those novice administrators are from school districts which are physically in the Region 4 Education Service Center. It isn't the service center's region. It isn't the service center's whatever geographic community. They are literally in the research center. These are really hard to catch because even if you hear them, you're so sure you know what you're saying. So what's the fix? Choose the pickiest person you know. Ask them to read it sentence by sentence by sentence just to see if each sentence makes sense. And maybe read aloud will help you. Thank you, Jennifer. Active and passive is an ongoing challenge for a lot of us. Let's talk about weak language. This study will use a qualitative methodology of data collection. The qualitative research includes an online survey questionnaire from novice building administrators of the personal experiences with their mentors and how these experiences impacted student achievement and teacher retention. Some of those sentences could have been pushed together and strengthened. But what's really the fix? Really the fix is to read more, is to go to the places where you have where your models are, and read their language, maybe import their language, try different sentence structures out. Many of us are professionals in a field that does not require us to have the precision in language that these documents require of us. So it's like trying to get on a new set of shoes and they don't quite fit, and you just don't have quite the right pace. What you want to do is read, and even highlight the sentences you particularly like. So when you're stuck for a sentence order and idea, the way you put ideas together, you can use those as models. Let's look at one. This is a tense issue, and I'm going to find it on screen. Okay, so this is someone who did what I suggested and imported the word usage from a model and then wrote over it in to figure out how he wanted to say those things in that part of the dissertation. And he got about halfway done. It's still in the past tense. So the documents in your models are past tense because they're final documents, and you're writing a formative document, so your document will be future tense. And so that's the first thing you need to do, is you need to change the past to future. And that hasn't been done here yet. There's a few other things, but so the purpose of this concurrent qualitative research study is to examine the perceptions of local school superintendents and school principals in 3 suburban school districts that are designated as the District of Innovation in Harris County, Texas. And I questioned the word concurrent, whether or not that was actually going to be true of this study, because concurrent is usually brought up if you're doing several kinds of data collection at the same time, frequently mixed methods. And I hadn't seen in previous drafts that this was actually going to be a concurrent study. Don't import words specifically about methodology that you don't know what they mean or have them. This study will explore the correlation between student scores and teachers who have been hired under the District of Innovation designation, fine sentence, data from the district leadership survey, comprised of superintendents and principals from 3 DOI districts, will be statistically analyzed to gain further insight into the effectiveness of the implementation relative to the original intent of the law. So if you take the time to import, then also take the time to change the tense, read it out loud, and make sure you like the flow of the document. And then there are some things with how the sample is, that the population is one thing and the sample is another. So just be really careful when you import that your words are as precise as they need to be. So what's the fix? Sentence by sentence. Continue to update until it reads well, till you hear it set out well, and then move on. You know, it's a 50-50 thing. Most of you probably are fairly good writers, and if you've stayed in the academic system kind of consistently, then you can look at these sections of the document and you can put in words that fit. But if you're unsure of your writing, if you're not, if critical analysis is not your forte, then you might try, especially on the sections that you're most insecure about, to import and write over, and then see what you think. worst case scenario, you check that writing and you write it again, but it will have been a decent first draft. Inessentials, redundancies. This is what so I'm now listening to my own work and I think, boy, did I need to say all that? Did I just ramble off into some outer space? So what's the fix? You cut it. You stop. You look at what you really wanted to say. You map out your points again, and then you cut back to just your points. And if you're not sure if you're rambling, read the section in your models. If you think maybe you need to say more because you just think, Jesus, this is really short. Do I have it all? Then go back to your models and see what other kinds of ideas they have that you can think, oh, I could talk about that too. Paragraphs too long, we've done. Thoroughness. Seem too short, don't know what else to say. Go back to your models, covered that. Focus and relevance. When you read yours compared to your models, now you've got them side by side. You read your language, you read their language. Do you see a big gap between the styles? Do you worry they're not thinking critically enough? Well, there's a couple ways you might consider figuring out what else you would want to add. One is to talk to a good friend and have them read it and then ask you questions. Another is to go to the models and see what else you might want to add. Obscurity. Ambiguous, uncertain statements, colloquial language, poor sentence structure. This happens when you stab at what you want to say, but you don't really know what you want to say. So you'll listen to it. It'll sound bad. You'll use soft words like you might use if you were talking, but aren't really appropriate for academic speak. And you stop there and you say, what is it I really wanted to say? What other questions should I be answering? Maybe I need to map this out again. Here's my heading. Here are my paragraph structures. Stop, rework that one section because you don't want to have a variation as your reviewers read between the strength of your writing. So once you get a section that is really the way you like it, take the time to make the rest of those sections stand up to that standard. Pace or tedium. You're going to hear this more than you're going to see it. Sometimes we fall in love with our ideas. Sometimes we fall in love with the way we say things. I, for one, just certainly sometimes I like a certain word and I use it a lot when I write that day, and I come back to it later and I just laugh and say, must have been in love with that word that day. Things like emerging. Oh, this is an emerging idea. So keep those words that are in fact sophisticated and do add to your writing to where you only use them occasionally, and look then at the people whose writing you like. Look at the award winners, see how they wrote, and as Oxbridge Essay says to us, recognize the value of long, slow incubation of thoughts. So you don't care if this paragraph you wrote is the best. You think about it. You put a whole chapter together. You incubate those ideas. And then when you come back, you ask yourself, what else could I say? What fresh analytical insights might I have? And for heaven's sakes, if you're letting the document read itself aloud to you, make marks whenever you get a little bored with your own writing. Because if it bores you, it's really going to bore someone who doesn't care as much about your ideas as you do. And then finally, we have the big bad guy, plagiarism. And one of the things I think is interesting about plagiarism is that a lot of it is unconscious. So I've given you the link to a webinar that are in. If you go to PD Education and you go to your to-do list, there's must-watch videos, and they are the absolutely evergreen. We think everybody ought to watch those videos if they're in graduate school basics. And one of them is avoiding unconscious plagiarism. Be perhaps shocked at how easy it is to unconsciously fall into that trap. Okay, so drilling down now, thank you for your attention. That was a lot. I did this so that you could have the slides, so that you could then go through your own work slide by slide if you needed to, looking for the mistakes that were maybe your mistakes. You need to say, do I do this? Do I have poor pace and tedium, etc.? And what else do we suggest? Go to the PD Education site that is yours. On the left-hand search, so there's two searches, left and right. Go to the left-hand search. If you click on academic writing, there's pages and pages and pages of solutions. You can choose then the kind of materials you like. So if you like webinars or podcasts, click on videos, and then you can listen to the video as you go around, or you, like it's a podcast, or you can watch it and go through it. Or you might like written things, or you might like checklists, and all of those are materials that you can get as kind of subheadings to academic writing. You can choose more than one thing. So we'll come to our conversation, but to make sure that all of this drills down into something you can do this week, I think a goal right now is, are you working every day or almost every day, even for a few minutes? If you haven't taken that on, maybe you want to make this the week that you test yourself to see if you can pull off 7 straight days, what that feels like, how you did it, build your muscles there. You might want to start, if you don't have a writing journal, then this is a week that you want to start that. You put the date, you put what you did, just a few bullet points, and what you want to do next. That way, if you can't make it the next day, you don't forget what you want to do next. So then you can track off if you have ideas, and I make boxes by mine. My journals all have these boxes out the front, and I color them in when I actually do that thing. So I can go back through previous pages and decide which ones I haven't checked yet, and do I still want to do them? And if so, that's what I work on next. Take any writing sample, compare it against these slides, just one by one, just a couple of paragraphs. Just really analyze your own work, and you may choose to have a friend take some pages of your work and analyze it for you against these slides. So let's see what's come up in the chat. Frustration of one of the problems with originality checkers like Turnitin is that it takes citations as copying or plagiarisms. Therefore, the more citations you use, the higher the count. The software that is on the market that helps catch plagiarism has as many foibles and frustrations as it has strengths. It also can, if you've used it before, you have to make really sure it's not comparing your work against your work from previous times. So if you're using those tools, know how to use them. And maybe a different way of moving forward is to be sure you understand what plagiarism is and how it can happen unconsciously, and then just to hold yourself to a standard where you're clear that that isn't going to be you. Adrian says her take is the more complex the ideas in a paragraph, the more sensible it is to keep the sentences in transition as clear and concise as possible. Yes, shorter sentences, less complex sentences, much easier to skim through. Most people reading your document will not be reading it word by word. They will be going like this. So help them go fast, because your language is easier and your complexities are in several sentences rather than all hooked together in one. Oh, that's very good, Jennifer. I didn't know there was intellectual property issues with Turnitin. She tells us that to use those tools, especially Turnitin, be really clear on what intellectual property you're signing over to them. That's critical. That's seriously critical. So excellent conversation. Now let's just say what's coming up next. We've talked about the basic processes that you need to be able to write up. Today we talked about writing, and next week we're going to expand lit review. So I am calling for any of you who have a proposal that you're working on. It doesn't matter if it's all together. I would prefer them to come in with a navigation pane that I could jump around in. And I would like to use those as data next week to discuss that idea of lit review being the middle ground between the bookends of the background and the methodology. So please, my email address is alana@doctoralnet.com. I'll type it in so you can. And if you send me stuff, you'll get some free thoughts about where you might want to take it and what I see as the places it might wobble more than you want it to. And that kind of idea. If you're still putting those ideas together, next week should be good for you because we'll critically analyze other people's work. And if none of these come in, I will do a critical analysis of some finished documents about how they did that together. Okay, got a slide correction on the slide before last. Have a friend read your work. Can you repeat how to find the forum section? Oh yeah, very good. Okay, so Pat has asked me to show you how to find the forum section. We go back to my active screen. And I think I might have a page open, maybe not. Go into any one of our sites. And I'll just go to the demo site because it knows me best. And so once you sign in, the forum is under self-directed learning. It's the first menu item, directed learning. And you have the modules and then you have the forum. And the forum, there are also forums in each module. So if you were looking at argumentation and you wanted to start a conversation just about that particular module, those are down here. But for general conversations for this summer, we had 3 topics of people. Conversations for those who were designing research. So this is about research design, which might be different from those of you who are beginning to write. Might be more about conversation of writing, things like we discussed today, and conversation between those who have data and are finishing up. And I try to get to them. It's used sporadically, and so I actually sign into the forum 2-3 times a week. But other people sign in and offer things as well. And for any of you who've had difficulty finding, if you watch this by recording and you've had difficulty finding our handouts from the recording, Adrian put up a screen share of where to find them. So that was very useful. So hope that helps, Pat. And which proposal chapter do you recommend you write first? I actually think if you're just starting for the first time that it's very useful to write the methodology first. And I'm a lone wolf on this one because very few other people who work as supervisors would necessarily come up with that. But over the years I've worked with people, I found two things about the methodologies chapter. One, it typically is the chapter you're most scared of because you don't know about methodology. And two, it's the one that's almost the most formulaic because you can look at your models of people who are doing methodology similar to yours, and you can import and write over and have a fairly good chance of it having a robust sophistication within a revision or two. So it's a good exercise of your ideas. And also, you need to show it to people before you get really involved in the rest of your writing, in my opinion, because somebody who's done this methodology needs to give you a heads up if you're taking on more, or you have very little chance of getting those data, or something is making it less than likely you're going to have an easy time at data collection and analysis. So, answer your question, I recommend you do the methodology first. Professora Maria completely disagrees with me. She wants you to do the background first. Both of those work because they are do one and then the other, and then the lit review in the middle. That will make it less likely that you write a lot of things in your lit review that your lit review doesn't need to have. Let's see what else I've got here. Really liking your questions, and I'm happy to stay and answer them. The people who are coming to open office hours will wait for me. Slide corrections. Okay, got that. What would header sections with some bullet points work? Yes, Jennifer, header sections and bullet points would work. That's how, in fact, that totally works. We can get the idea. You don't have to have fleshed it all out, but we can see, are the ideas enough? Are they robust enough? Do you have loose things hanging out? So please, that would be fine to send. We don't have a fleshed out. Yeah. Adrian was sad to find that Citavi doesn't support Mac. Oh, too bad. Didn't know that. By the way, everyone, Adrian suggested Mac's QDA was the software that she used because she was doing mixed methodology, which really had me interested. And I am now about halfway through a trial. I think it's quite good for a software if you're looking for, or at the point when you're looking for your analysis software. Mac's QDA, that's it. Really good. Not so hard to use. That's my impression so far. Annalene's having a conversation about picking up references, adding this to my homework a week. We'll aim to send it to you. Good, Jennifer, looking forward to it. What is the software for mixed methods? Max, M-A-X, QDA. Yes. Erica, using Citavi for references. Excellent. By the way, Max QDA will import your reference software. I don't know if it's imports Citavi, but it does import many reference softwares, and you can use it for your lit review too, which I thought was interesting. Good. Well, that's our conversation today. I hope that that it has been a good conversation for you to be part of, that you feel like it's a good use of your time. Please go there, surveymonkey.com/r/scholars summer, and tell us what you think. Mendeley actually is one I think that Max QDA imports from. I thought that was true. Excellent. Okay, glad it worked for most of you. Hope it worked. Whether it works or doesn't work, we want to know specifics, please, because that will help us drill into, when we do these live courses, which we do every summer, what is it that is helping you have the most success? Okay, I am off. I'm ending the recording and I am off to open office hours for anyone who wants to drop in.